Welcome to Impact Media Presents. Today is our 20th live stream since we launched April 18th, and we're in the third segment of Where Do We Go From Here, the series, with our national leaders. And my guests today are all impacting social change. We're going to discuss collective impact and provide critical action steps that we all can take. Many of you are curious about who's leading the Black community and what's happening aside from the protesting. Well, today, those questions will be answered. With that, I'd like to introduce you to Marc Morial of the National Urban League, Derek Johnson of the NAACP, Dwayne Crawford of Noble, and Kayla Hicks of Sustained Equity Group. Thank you so much for joining the conversation. How's everyone doing today?
Hey, thank you for having us, Kelly.
Great. Thank you so much. We're going to dig right in. We want to talk about why. Let's start with why. Why do you do this work? I want to start with Kayla.
Can you hear?
Muted, yeah.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Yes.
So, Kelly, thank you again for allowing me to be here. Very humbled and honored to be amongst this panel. My why just has to be simple. I am the work. I've had the lived experience, so beyond the knowledge of the education and being an expert in my field, I think it's really important that representation stands out front. So I do this because I've experienced most of what we see on the ground now. And I want to make sure that all that I've learned, I'm able to give back to others so that we can take sustainable actions that are evidence-based, but with a holistic approach.
Thank you. What about you, Dwayne?
Yeah, so first, greetings from the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives. But no, there's a scripture that says, much is given, much is expected. And I think, at least for me, is how do we meet that expectation? I've had an honor to serve the 100 Black Men of America in a leadership role, and now with Noble. And I think, and the point we are right now as a nation, that we all can have that level of service. That scripture really has kind of led my life. And I think that at this point we're right now in this nation, we all collectively can make a difference and meet that expectation.
Thank you. Derek?
I started this work when I was an undergrad. I went to an HBCU in Mississippi, Tougaloo College, arrived on campus from Detroit. In my life, I've seen examples of strong Black leadership, whether it was Mayor Coleman Young in the city of Detroit, getting on the campus of Tougaloo with a history of social justice and meeting people such as Congressman Thompson and Kwame Ture, formerly known as Stokely Carmichael, would come on campus every year, and many other veterans. It felt natural, but it really felt natural when I began to get engaged on that campus. And another Detroiter, who's a lawyer who had moved to Mississippi by the name of Chokwe Lumumba, and sitting at his house and listening to them plan out many things, I was connected. I was hooked, and I thought I felt that it was nothing better for me to do but be engaged in the movements for social justice for our people.
Thank you. And Marc?
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me, Kelly. And good to be with Kayla, Dwayne, and Derek today. I think it's just in my DNA to want to live a purposeful life. And a purposeful life means working for others, working for change. And, I grew up in a family that was intimately involved in the 1960s civil rights work, and then intimately involved on the cutting edge of politics in New Orleans and Louisiana. And I was taken by that and never really wanted to do anything else but live a purposeful life and live an impact-oriented life. I think Dwayne is right. To those to much is given, much is expected, required, and demanded. And to Derek's sort of observation, it was also my opportunity as a young boy, as a teenager, and as a young man to get exposed to great leaders, great local activists, great local lawyers, pioneering judges, and others who never ever had an apology or willing to make an apology about what they stood for and their authentic commitment to Blackness and to commitment to people and commitment to justice. So I think it's that. And I think the last thing I'd say to young people is when you find your passion and your purpose, then never will there be a day in life when you will work. Because work is your passion is your work, and your passion is your work is your life. And I think that for many who do this, that is what it is really all about.
That's right.
Well said.
Because although people have the misnomer that this is glamorous, it is extremely, extremely hard work. And most people can't even imagine the sacrifice
Not only
involved.
that, it's a work where you get threats. I mean,
Right.
there's a side of this work that people don't see, where people throw shade, they throw rocks, they throw barbs, and you can't think about that, you can't worry about that. And when you're in this work, you're involved in the work of productive and creative friction and tension. And everyone's not going to be in love with you, every position you take, and you got to take it. You got to be tough enough to take it and follow your conviction.
Yes. Right. Like all of you, I've been motivated for the same reasons. My parents were on the front lines, in the 60s, and made some very bold and courageous moves and sacrificed personally, as a result. And so I was in training before I even knew I was in training. And I've never been content with how things were. I look through the lens of how to make things better, and knowing that change needed to happen. And as early as 12 years old, I was really concerned about how Black people were portrayed in media and entertainment. And I knew that it could be different, and decided that I was going to play a part in that somehow, some way. So thank you all. Marc, let's start off with you. Tell us what the National Urban League is doing programmatically, and what your primary call of action is for others to get engaged and be involved.
So we like to think of our work programmatically as being about economic empowerment, and about helping people empower themselves economically and creating systems that provide for the economic empowerment of Black people and other people of disadvantage. And what makes us unique amongst, I think, the civil rights family of organizations is that we focus on direct services programs in addition to legislative advocacy and thought leadership, both at the national and the local level. I think a lot of our power is in the 90 local affiliates that we have, who serve about 1.5 million people a year. So whether it's after school programming, home buyer education programming, workforce programming, efforts around democracy and voter registration, it's direct services, I think, that really defines us at the local level. But, interestingly, I think in the history of the National Urban League, when Whitney Young became president in 1960, he had a pre-existing relationship with Martin Luther King, because he had been in Atlanta at the School of Social Work at what is now Clark Atlanta University as its dean.
My alma mater.
And therefore, when he got to be president of the National Urban League, it was natural that he would join with Roy Wilkins and others, and James Farmer and Dorothy Height and A. Philip Randolph, as they sort of coalesced around the activism of the 1960s to seek to bring about change. I mean, today we are definitely about economic empowerment in the programming area, but we've also tried to elevate our role as an advocate, as a legislative policy advocate, as a sharp-edged voice on those things where we feel like we have expertise, and we try to be supportive in many other areas. And so we've been really, in the time I've been there, undergoing a transformation. It's been a transformation generationally. It's been a transformation of direction and focus. And I think Derek, I think, can attest to this. In the civil rights community today, there's a definitive philosophy of trying to collaborate and work together when we can, while respecting each other's sort of independence as well.
Absolutely.
And I have like no patience for crab in the barrel mentality and unnecessary rivalries. And you know, when you work in this space, you always got somebody trying to get you into a rivalry with somebody else. And I don't really play that because I think it's the voice of the devil, and the work of the knaves who try to put you in that kind of posture.
Marc, can you tell us a little bit about the policy agenda that you have and how others can engage and support those efforts?
So right now, I'll talk about now. Now we have a huge focus on the policy responses to COVID and George Floyd and the racial justice issues. So at the national level, it's the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act, which I think is the paramount and most important piece of legislation that the Congress can adopt to play the role that they can play in bringing about police reimagination, reform, accountability, and change. That bill, and it's important for people to understand, it's that bill. It's not any of these cosmetic bills. It's not any of these executive orders written in invisible ink. It's that we need something strong, and we're not going to compromise on something weak because too many of our men, too many of our people are being abused, losing their lives. And, you know, this is an enough is enough moment where we have to say enough is enough. And we're going to put our foot down and we're going to demand what we want. And the hour is here. You know, I would note that USA Today Monday reported on a poll that they collaborated on that showed that 72% of the American people want a substantive police reform bill. And so there's strong support. So we're strongly in support of that. Secondarily, with respect to COVID, there's a pending piece of legislation called the HEROES Act that passed the House that had many of the recommendations from the civil rights community and had strong input from the Congressional Black Caucus that would do a number of things. I would highlight the fact that it would provide sustainability funding for many of our cities. And many of our cities now are run by African-American mayors. Many of our cities have large numbers of African-American and people of color who serve as employees who would be subject to layoffs in the event that there's no sustainability funding. So we have an immediacy of our policy agenda, while at the same time, long-term visions, which are really incorporated into what we call the Main Street Marshall Plan that talks about a wide range of things. But I think we're in a crisis, we're in an emergency, and I think we have to really focus on what's in front of us. So we can't lose focus on this Justice and Policing Act. We cannot lose focus. We cannot allow it. That's why the protests need to continue. The activism and the channel outrage must continue at this moment. If we lose it, we lose our chance to bring about policy change.
Thank you, Marc. Dwayne, I'd like you to chime in, and I know you have an update since the segment 2 around some of the activism we were encouraging around some legislation that you mentioned. So why don't you chime in?
But Marc's already said, but he's absolutely right. We cannot compromise on this. And Noble represents over half the major cities have Noble chiefs and our sheriffs. And we're not all African-American, by the way. And we've made it clear, our national president, Sterling J. Davis, made it clear we're not going to compromise. So you look at the Justice and Policing Act, we support it wholeheartedly. I agree with what you said earlier. We've got to encourage all of our citizens to have their voices heard. Exercise your First Amendment rights, but it does matter. Now, I will tell you that, you know, we testified in front of the House, we testified in front of the Senate. I love that Senate hearing, and of course the vote occurred, and of course the bill, you know, on the Senate side is called the Justice Act. People don't understand this. When Marc said there's some major shortcomings, you need to listen to that. So imagine we're talking about either getting a federal law that addresses these issues of police reform, or we take another bill that basically wants to use federal grants as an incentive to departments. And mind you, there's nearly 18,000 law enforcement agencies. a fraction of them receive federal money. But anyway, you receive a federal dollar and you now must comply on some of these reform efforts. We agree wholeheartedly, we need to get a federal law. So whether it's looking at consistency of use of force policy, like wanting bans on chokeholds or vascular constraint, or looking at this issue of qualified immunity, there's a number of elements. I won't look at all the details, but please take the time, audience, to read the Justice and Policing Act. It is a major difference. This whole conversation about what are all the same, no. We need a federal law. You look at what occurred in Ferguson, Missouri. You think about it. Now, similar outrage. There isn't a federal law today or Department of Justice policy, to the best of my knowledge, that changed since Ferguson. Now, to President Obama's credit, he did create, and I was part of that, and many of us were, in the 21st century policing recommendations. That did occur, but they were not binding. We must get a binding bill. Now, I agree also, COVID-19, we're just as word on that front. Many of my members are first responders, and we know we've got to focus on that too. But I would say to the country, use your voices and keep this in mind. It isn't just a federal battle. It's also a local battle, meaning citizens can go to their city council. What amazes me when you see marchers or protesters, I applaud it. But you never see a sign that says, remove the city council or the city manager or the mayor. You have to go upstream also. So as citizens demand the reform locally, you're starting to see it. Whether it's in Boston, whether it's in Richmond, mayors are taking on many of these issues that are national, but also locally. I should also applaud our attorney generals at the state level. So it's a battle on a federal front, but it's also a local and state battle also. So citizens, lend your voices, but go to those local meetings and demand reform.
Thank you, Dwayne. And I know Derek is eager to jump into this conversation, and Mark talked about enough is enough, the killing, and we know the NAACP has the campaign, We Are Done Dying. So tell us more about that and what else you're doing, Derek. And congratulations for all the work that you're doing in this new role, fairly new role for you.
Thank you. And everything that was just said, I agree. We have to change the culture of policing with our community, but also understand all police agencies are not built the same. They're not equal. You can go in some communities and have a different level of relationship compared to other communities. Where I grew up in my neighborhood in Detroit, we knew the good officers and the bad officers. If something went down, it was always good to see Junior Hawkins pull up, as opposed to the two white boys we call Starsky and Hush, because we knew Hawkins immediately understood what was really taking place and could address it appropriately. But when they pulled up, we knew that it was going to be a different level of engagement that was corrupt, to say the least. I mean, they were quick to take money out of people's pockets, assuming everybody was a drug dealer, not arrest you for drug dealing, but assume it was drug money. But when they pulled up, we knew that if they pulled somebody out and took them for a ride, that somebody was going to be beat. Unfortunately for those two officers on the block I grew up on, they killed somebody, a guy by the name of Malice Green, and they have been since incarcerated. But in that experience, we had Officer Conway, we had the now sheriff, Benny Napoleon. They all patrolled those areas, and they grew up in those areas. We knew, and so we have to really look at the culture of policing, because not all officers are bad, and not all Black officers are good.
I agree.
And we cannot allow bad acts to go from agency to agency, because one, they have qualified immunity, and two, there is no database to that allow transparency when officers create havoc in our communities. And so the Justice and Fairness Act is the act. It is the teeth that we need to have that's national in scope. But underscoring all of this is the emerging culture of Klan membership that's within law enforcement agencies across the country. That's not talked about. Under this is the reality that a lot of these young officers are overusing steroids, which cause steroid rages. That's the reality that people don't talk about, because there are no drug testing. Underneath this is a criminal syndication of officers who prey on poor communities for their own personal profits. That's not talked about. And many of those officers, they don't live in the communities they patrol. They patrol the communities they disrespect, they dislike, they move out of, but they go in and we expect them to provide safety for those communities where they don't care about those communities. And so this act began to address some of those things, particularly that national database, particularly qualified immunity, and especially right-sizing the culture of policing in our communities. Because if there's a domestic issue in a household, you want someone to be able to pick up the phone and call for help. But you want to make sure that call for help are people who reflect our values, who respect our communities, and can empathize with the reality that we live in, particularly if that call is to address a mental health issue that's been underfunded and we've overfunded the police agency.
Yes. Derek, can you tell us a little bit more about what the NAACP is doing programmatically as well, including the Image Awards and how that, makes an impact in our community?
So multiple things.
Yes.
111 years old advocacy organization. And the founders of the NAACP and the founders of the Urban League understood there's a need for both advocacy and service. Our primary role as advocacy is to impact the formation of public policy. We exist in 47 states, 2,200 units across the country. When I walked into this role, from the other side. I called myself an end user. I was a volunteer. I served as a college president, a state youth president. I served as a state president for the state of Mississippi on the national board, vice chair of the board. So I know all the politics. But I know it from the end user perspective to ensure that the work, the voice, the platform of the NAACP can inform the formation of public policy and in many cases, corporate policy. And so in that, we also understand the projection of images on the screen can inform how people treat us in the street.
Yes.
The first campaign we took on as an organization was anti-lynching legislation, giving federal authorities the power to go into local jurisdictions to investigate, prosecute, and convict those who were involved in lynching. Because the federal government didn't have that authority. Now we have that authority. We take it for granted, but now we have that authority. The second major campaign we took on was the launching of a movie called Birth of a Nation, with projection of an image on the screen. And that image on the screen was promoted by our president, Woodrow Wilson, who showed it in the White House. And that film, it did more to spread the membership of the Klan than anything else, because Klan was an organization that was dying. But because of Birth of a Nation is showing that the damsel in distress, the white woman being raptured by these beastly black men, was about to take place until this vigilante group who rides in on horses and hoods, the Klan, came and saved her. That film spread the membership of the Klan across the country, so much so that by the mid-30s, there were more members of the Klan in Indiana and Michigan than you could find in Alabama, Georgia, or Louisiana. Mm-hmm. The projection of images on the screen has been something that we fought for a while now. So 51 years ago, we established the Image Awards to celebrate positive projections of who we are. Our next step now is really drilling down into content creation. So we not only celebrate the projection of positive content, fight against negative content, but start developing content. Secondly, absolutely, when you have major platforms like Facebook, and this broadcast probably will be on Facebook, and they use that platform to allow white supremacist groups and racial hate groups to meet up and recruit members and execute on plans to kill people, literally, this whole notion of boogaloo, individuals who are trying to incite a civil war, meeting up there and kill the federal officer. When you have this platform, then they can put forth the guardrails to prevent that. And in fact, their algorithm promote racial hate groups. You pay for an ad and they push these ads to certain pages so people can join. That creates a level of insecurity for our community. That creates a level of insecurity for our society. On top of this platform, allowing a foreign nation to use the platform, paying for ads to promote racial division with foreign currency under this assumption that it is Black Lives Matter. Understand that Black Lives Matter is a strong slogan, it's a hashtag, it's multiple organization, and it's a factual statement. But because foreign nations know the division in this country, the historic racial division, they can exploit that division to cause chaos and subvert democracy. So we've launched Stop Hate for a Profit campaign, and you see it across the news now, calling on corporate America. If you've had these statements after George Floyd that you think it should be a better society, do something. Statements and outrage is not action. Let's take some actions. And finally, as we look at this upcoming election, in NAACP, it is our role and our job to get people to the polls. Now, everybody said we're going to get out to vote, but we cannot do it like we've done in the past. We have to have a metrically driven, targeted approach in the areas where we can truly have impact. How can we get people who are infrequent voters, who have not voted but once in the last 10 years, to go to the polls? If we have an increase of voter turnout 3-5% in targeted areas in the 11 states that we're looking at, in the races where we know if we increase, we can impact the outcome, whether it's a district attorney race or a congressional race or a state legislative race. That is our targeted project for this year. And the final thing, as Mark was saying, social justice isn't a competition. We all have a role to play. If we do our part, we don't have to criticize another organization for the part they're doing, because we're focused on our work and not focused on what somebody else should do, could do, or whatever the case may be. We have to be focused. The vision in this moment should not be tolerated. A united front to create a society that was beneficial for us and our community is the way to go.
Absolutely, Derek. And that's exactly why, we're all here to talk about this collective impact and how we can continue to engage and reach some who are not being reached, different generations who don't know about the legacy or know about what's happening, today. And then those who just got comfortable. When I launched Impact Media, when I had this concept 10 years ago, people were bold enough to say and believe that they thought we were living in a post-racial society. It's like, what rock are you living under? It's like the opposition is very strategic. They have not stopped. They are, working really hard, and we need to too. So I thank all of you for all the work that you've done consistently over the years on behalf of our people. Derek, you mentioned the whole Facebook platform and the way that they're handling promoting hate in some ways, but then suppressing good news and good things that would be helpful to support the Black community. I was sharing with Dwayne that our second part of this series was suppressed. They blocked our ads. They would not allow us to boost the post for the ads for this. I asked for reasons why. They did not provide them. And so I already knew this one wasn't going to get, and I believe there's actually an active campaign starting today for Black organizations and people not to purchase ads through Facebook right now. So I will put that out there as a campaign and a platform that you can support right now, because they need to do things differently and we need to hold them accountable. So thank you. Kayla, let's hear from you and the work that you're doing with Sustained Equity Group. It's very exciting. I'm so excited
you all hear me?
Connect. Yes. So Kayla is going to share a little bit about Sustained Equity Group now.
Kelly, thank you. And, I've gone through the same thing with this Facebook suppression, which I'm really surprised at.
Yes.
And definitely think that we should elevate that conversation more. Most people probably look forward to going last. I did not enjoy this at all. I started to take notes, trying to follow up after these three. So let's just not do that again. Like, I started taking notes. I don't even know what to look at right now. So everything that they
this
said,
sister is powerful. Don't that's the 1-2 knockout. She's just lowering your expectations so she can come at you. That
was a lot. So so I really, what resonated with me with Mark is when he said the hour is here. I think that is like the most incredible thing right there, is to understand that is literally where we are and the work that we're all doing. And when Dwayne mentioned about upstream, how important it is to make sure that we are not just putting information out, but how is that information getting to the spaces that it's needed to be, mostly where people are mostly impacted with social and economic disparities, right? How do we get that information there? And Derek, the competition, that is like the biggest problem that we have right now, is that people are actually believing we're in competition. And it's usually because of funding, right? People begin to do things, strange things, because there's a small pot of money and everybody has to pick from it. But we have to learn how to complement each other and not complicate each other. But the work that I'm doing is echoed in everything that these gentlemen just shared. But the value that I like to add and bring is the perspective of women of color, particularly Black women. So that's where I'm working to make sure that we are building power there. And the name of the organization, Sustain Equity Group, is by no mistake. When you want to invest and make sure your money's right, the first thing you're thinking is, how can I sustain this? So we also have to be mindful that everything that was just shared here today has this institutional knowledge has to be brought down to a local level. And we have to make sure that we turn research into relationships. So that's what I'm doing, is making sure that the voices of Black women that are being silenced, because we do know that there is a tragedy amongst this country when it comes to Black men. But there's an equal tragedy with Black women, and we become, the hashtag. But beyond the hashtag, what are we doing to make sure that Black women are in the front of these conversations? Because I know my experience in years of working, I've worked in the corners, of congressional halls and senators, and, right to the corner with, poverty and gang members, just, wherever I have to go, I go. And I think my biggest, hope is that individuals such as yourself, that we are going to start creating easy access to individuals like you all, where we can get you in places. So there are a lot of people that believe, and I can speak to Dwayne Crawford, there are a lot of people that believe that he was untouchable. They see this towering tall man that comes in with these power business suits that are tailored, and he's just looking like $1 million, and I'm like, well, he doesn't understand me. And I think, the good thing about Dwayne is that he showed them that, listen, I can talk any way you need me to talk. What do you need? Just tell me how I can help you. And it's about making sure that I can get you all in these spaces where people dream to be Mark. They want to grow up to be Derek. They want to grow up to be Dwayne and Kelly and Kayla's, because that's what we have to do, is begin with a succession plan. So that knowledge, evidence-based, holistic approach, and not trying to recreate things that are already done. Each one of you have platforms in policy, public safety, public health, and in our legal field that we can come together and give an agenda for our communities. We have to remember that our communities are not broken. They need the knowledge and the resources and a support network. And I would love to continue this dialogue where we can put these faces out there, where people know that it's not just about what's wrong with Black people, because you believe that we are all broken and we have nothing and it's always me, when I'm looking at you all right now. And we need to start pushing that conversation and bringing awareness that we are progressive people. And there are a lot of wonderful people out here that can help us change the issues we're all addressing, because if policy doesn't change, everything remains the same. But when you go into a community where they don't understand that policy is not going to change your life today, that it's a marathon and not a sprint, and they're not giving that information, then that's when we see lower voter engagement and turnout, because they're like, why? Why would I do anything? Because look what's happening anyway. So we have to do better and teach. And those two programs that I'm working on now is the National Black Violence Prevention Advisory Council. And that's where we are bringing people from all of those spaces, public safety, public health, public policy, and our legal scholars to be the voice. Representation matters. So we want to make sure that, and Kelly, you and I talked about this, when we turn on the television and we see everything that's happening, but all I see are white men, typically older white men, that are giving me statistics and information on how I could be better, how my community could be. I'm tired of that. I want to turn to a network that looks just like this, because this is what I'm going to trust. So we have to build upon that. And I'm hoping, all of you will be a part of that. And then I have the U-Train, which is a leadership institute. And that's, making sure that we have a vehicle to get people from that trauma and that tragedy into the triumph, because I'm standing on the shoulders of so many of you. And I'll close by saying this for me. When I started Sustained Equity Group, I was sitting, I got a lot of advice and counsel from a lot of wonderful people. And I will say that Mr. Crawford has inspired me to do so much in spaces that I was afraid. I was afraid that I was going to fail, or I was going to do so well that I might take the shine from others, and that would be a problem. But I finally realized that I have a purpose and that I have to get my work done. But I was watching I Am Not Your Negro, and I was listening to James Baldwin, and that always gets to me. I don't know what I was doing. I wanted to relax, and I don't know why I thought that was what's going to help me, because it didn't. But it encouraged me to do something. When Dorothy Count Scoggins came on, that iconic picture of her standing in a sea of white children and adults that are screaming at her, yelling at her. And, I've always looked at that picture and valued that picture. When I said in the beginning, I am the work, I am this work because of Mrs. Dot. I looked at that day, and the tears came down, and I don't know why. They were silent, but it was hurting so much, because in that moment, I realized that myself at 49, I'm looking at this picture, and for decades, I thought that that was a woman. And when I learned that she was only 15 at that time, I realized my challenges are not great at all. They are very small in comparison to what the people are going through, such as this panel and the people that have come before us that allow people like me to have a platform like this. But I watched and I looked at that picture, and in that moment, something told me to find Mrs. Scoggins. And in my other life, I'm a retired bounty hunter, and I still am a private detective. But I was able to find Mrs. Dot, and I called her, and she answered her phone. I actually called her cell phone, and I told her who I was, and she welcomed me like she knew me forever. And she told me that she'd mentor me and guide me. And I talked to her for over an hour, and I keep in contact with her because Mrs. Dot has inspired me and reminded me that what happened almost 65 years ago is important for me to remember today, that my Blackness and my lived experience tells me that I did not do anything first. I'm doing it different, right? Nothing new under the sun. So we're doing it different. But what does different look like? Does different look like we're going to close that gap where there's us and them, and that us and them looks like us? Well, they don't understand me because they have titles. So let's work together to make sure that we're engaging communities in a way that is easy and digestible, and that institutional knowledge is on a local level. So that's where I'm at.
Thank Kelly, you, Kelly. I'm going to have to excuse myself, Kelly, for another conference call.
Okay.
So I wanted to just thank you so much for what you've done. Great to be on with Dwayne and Derek and Kayla for a great discussion today. So we'll be together and continue your great work.
Thank you so much, Mark. Thank you for joining us. And I'll follow up with you.
Please do.
All right. Thank you. So part of what you were saying, Kayla, about the access, it really is a misperception that you're not able to reach or connect with our leaders. And that has just not been the case. I mean, if you reach out, you may need to have, some consistency and follow through. But for the most part, if you are approaching, with a purpose, I found that they've been extremely receptive. So
I
think you see, can't hear. Yeah.
Okay. Why don't you log off, Derek, and then log back in? That may correct it. I'm not sure, but everyone else can hear, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
So early on, Reverend Dr. C.T. Vivian, when I was in my, I did a diversity report for the university that I went to undergrad, Drake University, and he was doing his workshop, and in the middle of it, he's like, Sister Delta, you want to do this, don't you? And I'm like, I do. And he said, you will. And I stayed in touch with him, and 10 years later, he called me to do the training with him. I was also fortunate enough to be able to shadow Dr. Dorothy Height while she was at the helm of NCNW. And so it's just, you just have to understand that we, like you said, we're all people. You know, it doesn't matter what position or title that you have. You know, it's all about, you know, making connections and genuine connections with good people doing good things. And so, you know, we don't have to be concerned about that.
And
so,
to your point, Kelly, is, you know, part as well as I do, and Kayla also, is many of our traditional leaders, right, are now in their 70s and 80s or older.
Right.
We also feel the urgency that our generation, okay, we really got to pick up that mantle and continue the work that they started. Many of them, you know, we've had a chance to work for or work with, but you're right. But the hour is now. We've got to get to work on behalf of our communities.
Absolutely. And so what I'd like to transition to is, you know, what's working and what's not working, you know, for Black people, especially since George Floyd. We all know that our organizations, Black-led organizations, are not getting the level of funding, you know, by our counterparts. Philanthropy.com out of the Chronicle of Philanthropy just posted an article about that, you know, giving the grave statistics around how underfunded we are to do this work. So we know that's not working. We do know that there's been an interest from corporate America and others who are now willing to make, you know, greater investments, and we appreciate those, and we need more. And we need them, as we've talked about, the sustainability piece. It's so critical that they invest at a level to sustain our organizations, new startups, and those, you know, who are, you know, in that, you know, 5-year plus range, all the way up to our legacy organizations like the NAACP and the Urban League, who've been around for over 100 years. I know next year in 2021, we're celebrating the centennial for the LA Urban League. And so all of these investments, you know, to sustain our communities are extremely, extremely important. But I'm going to open it up. Why don't you tell us, we'll just have a free flowing conversation, what's working, what's not working?
Well, I think what's working, I think one, the display of a mosaic or a diverse set of protesters that are expressing their disappointment, their rage, but I think also their hope in that something may actually change. And it is working. I think also that, though I want to see more of this, is we're starting to get, and some of the work that Derek, you're doing in NAACP, we're starting to hear some of our private sector. That's been a group that really has been pretty silent, both during the Ferguson, Missouri issues that were created there. I do want to give my condolences to the Brown family. And then, of course, what's going on now. We're starting to see, though, more of the private sector, not just make a statement, but literally begin to get engaged in these issues. All I just want to say here is I'm also enjoying also you're seeing diversity of both race, age, gender, sexual orientation. Let's be very frank about it. Minimum as I see is you have as many, maybe more white protesters than you have African American, Latino. And those things are working. I would just say this, though, is that going beyond the protests, right? Keep that pressure on. I'm hoping it'll also translate to the polls and that our folks will vote. So it's about hope.
Absolutely.
You know, correctly. We have to move from protest to power in the vote, and then from power to public policy changes to address systemic structural racism. We can do that. Then, Kelly, when you ask the question, what's working and not, that's the true evaluation. We are in a moment of opportunity. The real question is, are we ready to exercise this opportunity? Corporate recognition that structural racism exists. Is there going to be a moment of outrage with no action? We have to continue to monitor that. Public outcry in the streets with peaceful protests and look like America. It's a wonderful picture. Is that sustainable? And can we march those same people to the polls to really exercise the value proposition of the protest to the ballot box so that the policymakers elected can carry that value proposition to informing public policy? That's where we are. And this juncture can be fleeting or it can be sustaining. The opportunity is for us to seize upon.
And I'll just, say that what is working is things like this, like being able to see the representation and get the information from our leaders and to understand that policy is relevant. And I think we see more of our younger advocates out there with policy in hand and understanding what that means. And I think one of the things that's not working is what you mentioned, opening, and that is that holding the funding away from organizations that, such as each of our organizations. It's not okay anymore to pay someone $300,000 to come into a room for 30 minutes to say, there's a problem in the Black community, and here's how we think you should fix it. It's not okay. It's not okay to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on ads and marketing, sharing that you want to help our communities, instead of either matching that money that you're spending and giving it to the organizations that are doing the work, and or working out your budget so that you can share some of that money in ways that is effective, so that we can address the root causes to these issues. And I think that social unrest, we have to, I hold myself accountable to, we have to start showing up beyond funding. There are other resources and needs that we have. And together, there is equity in our influence and who we are. If I have an event that's going on and I need to have one of you there, we have to start looking at how that impacts everything that's happening today. And if it's going to be sustainable, it's going to be sustainable because people like us that have a platform are willing to come out. And I'm not going to say a name or call anyone out, but we can't try to charge new organizations or our legacy organizations hundreds of thousands of dollars for you to come and use your influence to encourage others. It's not right. You don't have to do that. So
right. Absolutely. That's very true. What also isn't working is when funders, foundations, organizations give funding to white people, I'll just call it out, and others to tell our stories and to do our work, and to fund them at a level that nowhere near represents what they're doing, and investing in the organizations that are doing the work. We cannot tolerate that, anymore. I've personally experienced it, being a part of, and applying for fellowship programs, and then I'll look and I won't get approved or selected, but then I'll look and see that they selected, a white woman to tell the stories of, our incarcerated Black men. And I'm like, wow, there's a huge distance. It happens all the time. And we have to hold them accountable. So thank you. I want to talk a little bit more about, as we're talking about collective impact, who our partners are. Let's uplift and celebrate the work that we are doing, collectively. You can share today about, how you're interacting and supporting each other, as well as, outside of this. But people need to see we are working together.
But for us, it all depends on what area of advocacy, what geography. I mean, we are a conglomerate organization. For many years, we operated like a mom and pop. It's been my mission to move us from a mom and pop shop to a true conglomerate. So we're in GOT United Nations. We are collaborating with the Ghanaians. We're collaborating with the UN. We have a Hollywood operation. So, we have a whole work there. We do a lot in Congress. Many members who are members of the CBC are former officers of the NAACP. So whether it's drafting bills, informing, we're there. I mean, so we're such a large organization, depending on what state, what geography. And I hold fast, it's not a competition. When you look at Minneapolis, our branch president is a 28-year-old lawyer, and she's a firebrand. She was both in the midst of the demonstration. She got tear gas one night when I was on IG Live with her. And they all know her, and she's immersed in that. And at the exact same time, she's talking to the police chief, who's a good brother, who had to file a discrimination lawsuit against the same department now he's the chief of. So we collaborate that way. The Movement for Black Lives, we're about to roll out a series of things that we're working with. Of course, Marc and Al and LDF. I mean, we collaborate up and down and across, depending on where the work is situated and if our voice is a part of the mix, either in a supporting posture or a lead posture. At the end of the day, because how I was trained in this movement, leadership are the people, not the personality.
Yep.
Egocentric leadership kills us every time. Community-centric movements is what's sustainable, is intergenerational, is effective, and it really have outcomes.
And Derek, I'd like to thank you and the NAACP, and especially Robin Lola Harrison, who has been a true partner of mine and Impact Media since I arrived. Whenever I call Robin, she's always there, whether we're having discussions, like this in live rooms or actually rolling up our sleeves and doing action planning. I've been on the nominating committee for the Image Awards for at least 6 years now. So I appreciate, the partnership. I've also partnered with the Urban League. They've been a strong supporter since I've been in LA the past 9 years. And Dwayne Crawford and I go back partnering over 20 years from our time in Atlanta, from when he was with 100 Black Men, but especially with Noble and Impact Media. And I'm really excited that we're able to do more, and I'm looking forward to doing more. And I thank Dwayne for the introduction to Kayla, and we're very excited about how we're going to partner moving forward. So Kayla, tell us
amazing
about some of your
and I do apologize, Kayla. I'm about to do a television interview I just got pinged for. Thank you for the opportunity, Kelly.
Yes.
Robin is always figuring out ways we can amplify our voice with our people, so I'm glad to participate. Good seeing you, Dwayne. Caleb,
yes.
Let us know how we can partner. We're looking forward to it.
We're gonna do some follow-up regarding that. Thank you so much.
Take care.
All righty, take care. Okay, so Kayla.
So, my partners are anybody that wants to support the development and advancements of women of color, particularly Black women, working and leading violence prevention organizations at the grassroots level as well as beyond, and making sure that those stakeholders are community. We do have individuals that Black women that have survived police brutality, where they have had knees in their necks and where they have been brutalized and spent nights in jail when, they've done nothing wrong. So I think my biggest partner would be the everyday woman that are in these communities that, we have to build succession plans with, and we have to remember that when we're not here, we need to have prepared others to come after us. So we should be bringing them with us now. So my community partners are first, but also making sure that public safety, law enforcement, everything I do and everywhere I go, it's always been for the past 7 years that I've worked closely with Noble as a community partner, and there's not one place that they don't fit, right? I'm talking about violence prevention. So, who better to talk about it than Black police chiefs and executives that are in law enforcement and patrolmen, people that are experiencing it. Sworn law enforcement officers have to be a part of this work, as well as agencies like Dwayne's. And then public health, like we work from a public health model. That's very important, and making sure that our legal and policy experts are included in there. And then beyond that, people in the gun violence prevention movement, there are some really good, strong partners there, and looking beyond that to make sure that we, this work is going to require for us to work in a different kind of way. If you would. Crawford would say, if you want something different, do something different. So, we got to do something different. Yeah.
And speaking of that goes directly into the next phase of this conversation as we're bringing it to a close. What's next? What can we do next? And I'm grateful that the two of you are here, and we actually have this time. I'm grateful that Marc Morial as well as Derek Johnson were able to join us. We know we're on the ground locally as well as nationally. So what can we do? What can we start now as some actionable next steps, whether, collectively, or, if there are things that you're doing that we can support, and as the viewing audience. So let's talk about that.
So I'm not going to let Dwayne put me in a position where I got to go after him. Not going to happen. Dwayne. Not going to happen.
Okay. Well, the good news, I'm numbered now, right?
No, it's just like it's still like having everybody here. So no. But what my simple suggestion would be, one, I was thinking about it as I listened to everyone, between the five of us, or the groups that were here. Yes. I think we need to put out that clarion call and have a corporate challenge to make sure we come up with a number that all of our organizations would agree upon, and we go out there and get it. Make sure that we can get and hold people accountable that say we have the money, we want to give the money. Well, they don't have to look for us because we're here, right? So looking at how we can do that, because we can get that funding and the resources and things needed on the ground to the people that are mostly impacted. And I also think that supporting the work that's already being done, like Noble has great policies that we can support. And then you heard from Derek and Mark and their policies. So, and then, for me, it's not about creating a new policy. It's about what's there. Do we need to amend it? And if we do need to write new policy, how do we do it? And teaching individuals to do that. And just being supportive in this space, because the challenge is real. We do have a world full of hurting people. And when you have trauma, you cannot expect a pandemic and an epidemic to mysteriously stop, because there are things happening around us that actually makes it worse. The disparities become more aware in places that you typically wouldn't notice it. Now we are really seeing the cost of it. We're expecting COVID to make it worse. We've got to prepare families and ourselves, to make sure that we can sustain whatever equity and, whatever power we build. How do we sustain? And I think we do that as one, and come out in more of the front-facing conversations together like this, and keep making sure that we are the authors and the orators of our story. We have to challenge ourselves to keep getting in front of these things. And I'm hoping that with Dwayne leading the charge and some others, there's some really great people on the National Black Violence Prevention Advisory Council. I'm hoping that we will create that table for people to know that you want to stop here before you go there. And I'll wrap up by saying, I would love for our Black women and women of color to stop saying we don't have a seat at the table. Personally, I feel like we've been building, our ancestors have been building tables for how long? We build our table. We'll let you know if you're invited, right? We'll give you a call. So we don't have to wait to go to anybody's table. Just start building. I think we all have to arm, leg, chair, whatever we got to do to build it, we'll do it.
Right. I love that, Kaylin. Thank you for summarizing our conversation yesterday. Exactly. And when it comes to telling our stories, and we talked about this early on several live streams. One thing, and the last one that we had with celebrating Black men making positive impact in Hollywood, I'm putting a call out. I made a promise to CT Vivian that we were going to tell his story and do it, in honor and grace. And so that's one that I would love for everyone to help, contribute toward us, ensuring that those types of stories are told, and starting with that one. But you're so right, Kayla. We have to own our stories. And as a follow-up from series 2, there was a group, Dwayne, Police Chief Kevin Williams, as well as Kyle Bowser. And I did follow up just a few days ago saying, we said we were going to continue our discussions. Let's do that. And so we're in the process of, getting that scheduled, and we'll continue to do that with this group, as well, around how we can collectively, make an impact. So Dwayne.
Yeah. So Kelly, you brought up CT, who was a national treasure. And so please count me in on that. I remember some years ago, I got called to his office over there on the AU Center, Atlanta University campus there. The guy said to him, "You're CT." And list of all these corporations and so forth. And I teased him. I said, "Sir, I don't think you have to really work too hard, but to your point, please count me in on that." But I think, Kelly, these kind of platforms, we're going to continue to do this. We got younger people, right, in these forums. Sometimes there's kind of a disconnect, right? At the end of the day, look, this movement, whether it be what occurred now or what occurred during first, we're young people. I think that people like C-Dub, folks out in Ferguson, Missouri, and Hands Up United, and all those people. They're the passion of this movement.
Yes.
I want to encourage them to have their voice. But I'll say to you, Kelly, count me in on any platform. But people, I've got to listen to what you're saying and try to interpret how I can, in my own little way, own little circle of influence, right? Help work for them, help them get there. But I do think collectively, this is not the time anymore for any generational issues, any shade. This is one we collectively have got to say we got to get there, and get there can be defined a lot of ways. One thing I wrote to myself this morning was a comprehensive, honest attempt to address the systemic issues and injustices, which I know are very many of them.
Yes.
Short term, what we dealing with? Well, one, let's don't forget this COVID-19.
Yeah.
People are dying.
Yes.
And, all the details, my frustration over this, but I would just say we know disproportionately people of color have been impacted. Yes. And I think, though we got to fight, I know the other battles too, but we've got to convince, if nothing else, our own communities, how to stay safe, how to find a way where we can still thrive in a very challenging environment. But then at the same time, I agree with what I said earlier, we've got to push for state, local, and federal legislative change that is permanent from a police reform standpoint. Yes. And to say this, this too shall pass. Mm-hmm. This too shall pass. We aren't back here again. I'm gonna go back to Ferguson. I thought a lot of passion, enthusiasm, and I was on a lot of these task force. But the reality is, like I said this again, we're back to young black, unarmed black men, but they're young or old, and women that are being killed. We're back to not having a really structured way consistently in a profession called law enforcement to get real sustainable. Like, for example, having every agency, there's 18,000 of them, be accredited the same way. And then more importantly is our voting. If there's ever a time, and we always say this, life depends on it. Right now, your life literally depends on voting. And I'm not trying to make young people say, well, what vote? Look, we can get into all the reasons why, but as people used to say, if my grandmama and her grandmama and her grandma can figure it out, we can figure this out. We've
absolutely.
Got and as I said to her, there's a case. There's a case in Valdosta, Georgia, going on right now, where a man was brutally beaten by law enforcement down there. Let me first say this also. I didn't say this earlier. I work for law enforcement. The vast majority do an amazing job. But this did happen. And as I was talking to the lawyer, I said to him, you're telling me the mayor and the city manager have a tape. Now, the good news is his client survived, but his wrist was broken and a number of things happened. And I said to him in Valdosta, Georgia, this isn't about waiting for DC to do something, Washington, DC, or for us here on the discussion. Kelly, Dwayne, and Kayla, this is about, I said to him, what are the citizens in Valdosta, Georgia gonna do? I will leave it at that note. Everyone is listening and watching this. In your local community, what do you want out of your community? Whether it's law enforcement, whether it's jobs, housing, how about this? COVID-19 safety guidelines, whatever it may be. What do you want to see in your community? I think we're at a point right now, if anything we've seen, I'm seeing statues coming down. I'm seeing mayors walk in and literally saying, I'm supporting the Obama pledge, or hashtag 8 can't wait, or whatever it may be. I would say to our citizens, it's your God-given and your constitutional right to get the change you want to see.
Yes.
I'm not trying to make it as simple as that, but as I said to the lawyer in Valdosta, citizens need to know that an African-American man was wrist broken, handcuffed, and didn't break the law, by the way. And they need to understand that your manager and your mayor have a tape. And these officers aren't even on desk duty. Hadn't even been, nothing's occurred to. And I'm not here to say, I'm not seeing the whole case, don't know all the details, but I'll say this. If there's ever a time for citizens to exercise their constitutional right and their right of birth in this country, it is now.
Absolutely. I just want to thank you, Dwayne, Kayla. I also thank you, Mark and Derek, for joining us today. This is a to be continued. We are going to continue on the camera and behind the camera, on the live stream. And most importantly, we're going to roll up our sleeves and figure this out and bring more to the table, our own table, right, Kayla?
Yes, ma'am.
So thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to close us out, but thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Take care, everybody. Stay.
All right, wow, I am just full, absolutely full. I'm so grateful to those that joined me today. And I encourage you to stay connected with us on the Positive Impact Campaign page. Until next time, let's all inspire, engage people in strategic protesting and social justice. As you'll see when you follow us on the Positive Impact Campaign page, our regular Saturday time is no longer. We're going to host our shows and our live streams based on the availability of our guests. We don't want to be limited by time and space. And so we will have some Saturday shows, but we're also going to have midweek shows during the day, in the evenings. So make sure that you like our page, follow us so that you can stay connected with us. We appreciate you. We thank you. We honor you. Take care and have a wonderful holiday break. Thank you.